Are concrete fire pits an explosion waiting to happen? I don't know, but today I'm going to test it and find out. When water boils in an open pot, the steam can just escape into the air. But if you have something closed, say like a can of tomato soup, the steam has nowhere to go and it will continue to build pressure until the can explodes. So we can think about concrete or even rocks as that tomato can soup. And does the steam get out fast enough to allow the pressure to release, or does the pressure overcome and just explode it? And that's what we're going to find out today. Concrete is just a combination of coarse aggregate, fine aggregate, and cement mixed together. So it makes sense to see if rocks should actually explode. And I grew up in the Scouts. I am a proud Eagle Scout. And I always remember our troop master saying, never put sandstone near the fire because it will explode. And the reason he was warning about sandstone is it's one of the most porous rocks out there. And most sedimentary rocks that are formed through the compression of the sediment are very porous. Now, I went ahead and picked up some rocks from the creek back behind the shed, and I want to show you what they are, and we're going to test to see if these will actually explode. So I've got 4 different types of rocks. We have sandstone, mudstone, basalt, and slate. And now, if you are a budding geologist and you think that I am wrong, I could very well be, because I got that directly from the ChatGPT app by uploading pictures and asking it what stone it is. But it gave me some very convincing reasons why each of these was that rock. So we're just gonna go with that. But I do have a test that I wanna put these rocks through to see just how porous they are, and we're gonna dunk them in water and see what happens. Now, the fire pit that I have at my house is made out of concrete pavers, and just for the record, it has not blown up yet. But I did grab some leftover pavers and I put them in a tub of water because we're gonna really soak those and put them on the fire later. But right when I dropped them in the tub of the water, immediately bubbles started coming up. And that basically means that the water is infiltrating into the concrete pavers and displacing any air, and it's coming out. So I wanna see if the same thing happens to these rocks. All right, so I'm gonna start with this sandstone, which is supposed to be the absolute most porous. Let's just put this in there and see if any bubbles come up. And I can definitely see some bubbles on the surface, but nothing quite like what I saw on the concrete. So right off the bat, these rocks are definitely not as porous as the concrete is, which makes sense because there's a lot of air bubbles in the concrete. But just for good measure, we're gonna put these in a tub of water and we're gonna keep them there for a few hours and make sure they have completely soaked. But let's check out the mudstone. Ooh, so the mudstone definitely seems like it is taking in more water than that sandstone. Maybe that wasn't actually sandstone, who knows? All right, the mudstone's got some promise for an explosion later. All right, now the basalt. Now this one is supposedly a volcanic rock, so I'm not sure why it is actually less porous than some of these others, but let's drop it in and see what happens. Yeah, I see lots of bubbles on the surface, but not a lot coming out. Ooh, I can actually hear this mud rock picking up water. See if you can hear that. That thing is soaking in water like crazy. All right, for the final one, the slate, and I don't expect to see much, if anything, out of this one. Well, I was totally wrong. So the slate actually had a lot of bubbles coming off it. Who knows, maybe it's not slate, but the mud rock and the slate were definitely soaking in a lot of water. So I'm gonna let these sit and I'm gonna stoke up the fire. We're gonna toss them on there, get them up to boiling point and see what happens. All right, so this is our test zone. This is an old fire pit that was here when we bought the property. And as any good scout knows, the best way to start a fire is with a flamethrower. The fire's cooking and I'm gonna start putting some rocks on there. I also have my thermal camera here. So looks like the fire right on top there is about 470-ish degrees Fahrenheit. So we should be able to get these rocks up really hot really quickly. So I'm gonna start putting some on there. Basalite, that's the slate, that's the mud rock, and the sandstone. All right, so I'm gonna be chilling behind this OSB sheet and I got a little face shield and just kind of peek out with the thermal camera. All right, I'm gonna try to pinpoint the rocks here. So it looks like the rocks are about 150, 160. We know water boils at 200. All right, I just threw some more firewood on there. I wanna get that over 500 or 600 so the rocks can really heat up. All right, our fire is over 700 degrees now. So the fire's been going over a half hour now and those rocks are over 500 degrees. And so any of that water at this point is gonna just be gone, or it's gonna be steam just trapped inside there and it's not going to explode. But when I went around to get a closer look, the sandstone is actually all split up. So it cracked, but it didn't explode. That's what it's called spalling. Spalling is when just a piece of the rock just splits off because of that pressure. So it's not like big explosion like the tomato can. So the idea that rocks are gonna explode and just throw shards everywhere, I don't think that's actually what is normally gonna happen. Sure, it probably could, but even in that video from earlier, the rock just kind of cracked and fell into the fire. And the sandstone, same type of thing here. It definitely didn't explode. And as far as the other rocks go, it doesn't look like anything happened at all. All right, so the next day, these are all cooled down, and I'll tell you what, we're gonna start with the sandstone, and this is actually amazing. When the rock popped, it is into 3 pieces. The piece popped up in the air, turned upside down, landed, and balanced. This is like Stonehenge or something here. But this one definitely collapsed. Now, the mudstone did shift, but the mudstone actually is completely intact. It did not break apart at all. Now, looking at the basalt, looking at the basalt, same thing. This one does not appear to have any cracks. It is still completely intact. And lastly, the slate. Same thing for this guy. So the only one that had an issue was the sandstone. Guess my old scout leader was right. Don't use a sandstone in a fire pit. So now we know that some rocks will explode under extreme heat, but we need to find out, what about concrete? Because that's the whole idea here. I want to build a concrete fire pit, and I need to know if concrete is going to just blow apart or maybe even just get cracks under extreme heat. So what I've done is I've mixed up some samples of 3 different types of concrete. Now, this first one here, I mixed up just out of a regular concrete. This is a 5,000 PSI, and put it in a little form. I also used 2 other types of concrete to see if there's any difference between any of them. So the second one here is a fast set concrete, which I would expect to perform the worst because the faster it sets, the more gaps and the more porous it should be. And the last one I'm going to test is a crack resistant concrete, which I'm calling the no crack. Basically what they've done is added some fiberglass reinforcement in there and maybe some more additives to let that flex. So it's going to be really interesting to see if any of these will crack under high heat. And to be a little bit more scientific, instead of just putting them on top of the fire pit there, I want to make sure that they're getting even heat and that we know exactly what's happening. So I set up a little test jig, and we're going to actually use the flamethrower to test them. This little test rig, I think, is going to work out well. So I'm going to put the pieces here, and I'm going to be using the torch, and I have a little setup that's going to hold it in the same spot so we can make sure that it's being evenly heated. And then I'm just going to, I guess, probably tape down the handle, and then on the back side I have the thermal imaging camera that is looking straight at it, and we'll be able to see when that back of the rock is above the boiling point, and then that way we'll know anything inside there will have steamed or boiled off at that point. Now, I don't think this is going to explode, but I still want to have eye protection, but I'm not going to use the full face shield. I'm going to be using out my new pair of shop shades. If you've not seen them yet, shop shades, these are from my buddy John Malecki. These things are awesome. Super clear, they are scratch resistant and fog resistant, and they meet all of the safety standards. They also have these really cool side shields here. They are light and comfortable for all day use. These things are awesome. If you want to check out a pair, there's a link down below in the description. Go check them out. You're going to love them. They get great reviews. Shop shades, they're pretty rad. Now, let's nuke some stuff. So starting out, the back of our concrete is right around 88, 89 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're gonna be looking for this to get over, let's call it 250, maybe 300 degrees before we call it quits. But we're just gonna give it the beans and find out. All right, let's crank this bad boy up. And 3, 2, 1. Oh, jeez. That was substantially more than I thought it would be. We're turning that down. All right, quarter crank it is. Holy jamoly. This is gonna take a minute, so I wanna see what we're at on the front. Oh, wow. So we are well over 770 degrees, which is what this maxes out at. All right. Whoa, it is getting hot. You can see steam coming off that top left. All right, I shut it off and we went for right about 15 minutes. And you can see the front of this in the middle is well over 770 degrees, which is as high as this thermal camera goes. And the backside got all the way up to 250 degrees. And visually, I don't see any spalling, which would be pieces popping off, or really any cracks. So at this point, I know all the water has gotten out of that, and I did see steam coming off the top. What I think was steam could have been something else, could have been just smoke, but I saw steam coming off, so I feel like all the water boiled off and escaped, because this is gonna be worst case scenario. We're heating this up as quickly as possible. In a fire, it's gonna heat up probably much more gradually. I'm gonna take this bad boy off. These gloves are supposed to be heat resistant up to 900 degrees. Still a little concerned. Oh. Those gloves did work great, didn't even burn. But taking a closer look, I don't see any cracks whatsoever, just some little minor surface cracks. And as I carried it, it was completely solid. Nothing was falling apart. Now, I don't understand. According to the comments in these videos, I should be standing at the bottom of a crater right now, but nothing really happened. So I think maybe it's because of the fast setting concrete is probably the most porous of all the concretes. Now this 5,000 PSI concrete, this is definitely a lot more tightly dense and packed. So maybe you don't want to hold on to that steam just a little bit better and, you know, give us a good show. So we're going to set this bad boy up and put it to the test. All right, so we are starting right around 86, 87 degrees. And we're going to give it a quarter turn just like last time. And I believe we are ready in 3, 2, 1. We're gonna let this go for about 15 minutes, which is exactly how long the last one went. All right, we are at 250 degrees. We will turn it off. Now, something very interesting happened here. This one got to 250 degrees in just over 10 minutes. Now this front is still, let's see here, well over 770 degrees again. And I think the reason why that happened is because this high strength concrete is a lot more dense than that fast setting. Because first of all, I mixed that fast set a little dry. There was a lot more air gaps in between it. You can even see it on the side. But this bad boy is definitely more dense. I think what's going on here is it got hotter on the backside because the heat was able to transfer through a lot faster. And that's because the fast set had a lot more gaps. It's a lot more porous. And air is actually a great insulator against heat. So with all the molecules all packed together, that heat could transfer all the way through to the back, which means the water left in this would have converted to steam way faster. But again, I don't see any explosions. I don't see any cracks. We did get a little bit of fire on that piece of wood though. So, you know, that was something. But I've got an idea. There's one thing I want to try that if it doesn't give us an explosion, I don't know what will. So it's really interesting. It makes me think maybe fast set concrete is the best solution for making a concrete fire pit, because it's going to leave all those extra air gaps in there, and especially with a dry mix, which is for one, going to have more resistance to heat because of all the air gaps, and two, it's going to let that steam escape a little more easily. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. Let me know what you think. I'm sure there's some disagreements to what that actually means. But it also gets me thinking, if the fast set concrete helped resist the heat transfer really well, I wonder what would happen with one with refractory cement on it. Now, this is a sample that I made up the other day when I made these other samples, and what I did was I put about 1/8 of an inch of this refractory cement on there. And that's the kind of cement that you would use in a pizza oven or a kiln or a furnace. And so it has an extremely high resistance for heat. I'm gonna put this on there and we're gonna nuke it for 15 minutes and see how hot the back gets and what that looks like at the 10 and 15 minute mark, and if that's an even better solution than either of these. Now, before I put that refractory cement on there, it's worth taking a look at this one. And again, when you look up close, there are no cracks in it other than little minor surface cracks. You can see in the center there, it's all white from where the extreme heat was, and nothing really happened. Obviously, with the refractory cement facing the fire, we're gonna see how well this will resist the heat versus the other ones. And even with it being like 33% smaller. This is about 1 inch, the other ones are 1.5 inches. So the others are 50% bigger, but this one's 33% smaller. Weird, huh? And 3, 2, 1, move. All right, I think that's enough. And this was a complete failure. It only took a little over 7 minutes for the backside of that to get well over 250 degrees. Now I know it is thinner and I tried to actually add some thickness onto it and it did not bond at all. So I don't know what happened there, but I tried to make it thicker, it didn't. So yes, I know the test is flawed. But regardless, I think it shows us that a thin layer of refractory cement is not a silver bullet. It is not gonna hold back much heat at all. So I'm probably just gonna not use any of that on the fire pit when I actually make it. I know you guys were looking for some explosions and I am too. So I've got one last ditch effort that if anything is going to explode, it's gonna be this. And that is a concrete paver that has been soaking in water. That's right. I've had this bad boy in here for over 24 hours, and this is the exact concrete block that I have at the bottom of my fire pit. So we're gonna see if we just put extreme heat on this, if we can make steam fast enough that we'll at least get a crack out of it. I don't know, but let's find out. Now, at a bare minimum, we should see all kinds of steaming. We'll see if that steam leads to anything. All right, here we go. I'm gonna crank it up a little bit too, just to give us a little bit extra heat. So we're gonna go in 3, 2, 1, let's go. Now that is what I'm talking about. After a full 20 minutes, we got up to 250 degrees on the backside and there are huge cracks coming through this. I'm gonna move this out of the way because I'm gonna do something to try to completely destroy this in a second. But I think this is a great example of what would actually happen with a concrete fire pit. Now this crack down here at the bottom, you can see this thing just started widening up. And the coolest thing was looking at it from the backside with a thermal camera. You could see there was a crack already there because the heat was coming through, and then it started making this like starburst. Just looked like something from Stranger Things, like it was just gonna pull you into the upside down. Now what I will say is that this is a very old stone. It's been sitting outside for a long time, so those cracks were probably pre-existing. But that is what's gonna happen with concrete. Over a period of time with thermal expansion and contraction and expansion and contraction, you will get cracks. And actually, I've got a bunch of cracks in these cinder blocks around this fire pit for that exact reason. But I'm gonna throw some water on here and I'm gonna see if this thing just snaps in half with the shock of a cold water. And the front side of this is still in the center over 600 degrees. So I'm gonna throw some cold water on there. We're gonna see if that split will just go all the way through. I don't think this will explode because it's going to be like contracting, but I'm just going to kind of throw it from back here. That is crazy how quick that evaporated off, but even with an extremely hot concrete, you throw that on there, it's not going to explosively react and tear itself apart. Now, because none of these other ones cracked, I don't think we even need to test the crack resistant because it is just not gonna crack either. But it might be better in the longevity and help resist cracks over time. So can rocks explode in a fire pit? Absolutely. Will concrete explode in a fire pit? Probably not, but it will crack over time with enough heating cycle. But that's okay, I'm still gonna use it. I'm Brad, until next time, get out there and build something awesome.